Welcome to the Essential Ideas of John Locke. One of the first people to start building the foundations for the free societies we live in today was John Locke. Locke was born in 1632 in Rington, a village in England. His ideas laid the foundation for classical liberalism, which would become increasingly prevalent in Western countries. From 1667 through the early 1680s, Locke acted as a physician and intellectual aide to the Earl of Shaftesbury. Around 1679 to 1680, Locke drafted one of his most influential works, the Two Treatises of Government. Locke's two treatises argued for radical limits on the authority of the state, limiting the function of government to the narrow protection of people's rights to life, liberty, and estate. Locke fled to Holland in 1683 due to his association with Shaftesbury and his counterparts and their continued opposition to Charles II. While in Holland, he composed a letter concerning toleration, which is one of the great landmark essays in defense of religious toleration. Locke returned to England after the Glorious Revolution of 1688, which installed the more liberal regime of William and Mary. In 1689, the Two Treatises was published. He also published his A Letter Concerning Toleration around this time. Locke remained concerned about persecution, so these works were published anonymously. Locke's insights into the nature of a just government and the nature of freedom established the foundation for a radically different political philosophy. His writings influenced many thinkers and scholars, including Voltaire, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the Scottish Enlightenment thinkers, and the American revolutionaries. Classical liberalism, as it became known, became a revolutionary force in the Western world in the 18th and 19th centuries, and remains influential to this day. Today, the idea that all people are entitled to equal rights is common, widespread, and so permeates modern culture in Western countries that it's hard to imagine people thinking differently. However, in the time of John Locke, it was generally believed that there was a natural hierarchy. Some people were naturally superior to others. Some people were born to rule and others to serve. This was considered the natural order. The average person was considered to have only those rights that existing political and religious authorities chose to grant to them, and only so long as they chose to grant them these rights. In stark contrast to the dominant view of the time, Locke argued that all people were born with the same moral status. Therefore, no one is naturally born to be a ruler or servant. In other words, no one is born with a natural claim to authority over others. Locke thought that since we were each beings who pursue self-preservation and happiness, we each equally have the same right to pursue self-preservation and happiness. We each are born to a right to do as we see fit with our lives, liberty, and property. Let's use an example to clarify John Locke's radical idea. Gary was born into a family of poor farmers, whose lands were within the territory of King Louis. Despite Gary and Louis being very different people from very different backgrounds, Locke argued both were born with the same rights. Gary may be poor, but he's still a human being, just like Louis, and therefore entitled to the same set of rights. Locke's ideas were revolutionary because it meant the rights, possessed only by monarchs, kings, and elites of the time, were actually the birthright of every human being. Locke's ideas challenged the status quo of a natural hierarchy and laid the foundation for societies based on equal rights for all people. One of Locke's most important and enduring insights related to property. Locke argued that every person was born with certain basic natural rights, and that these natural rights enabled individuals to acquire further rights, including property rights. Locke argued that, first and foremost, every person has a property right over themselves. In other words, each person has a right of self-ownership, meaning others, such as a king, do not have control over the individual person. This view stood in stark contrast to the view that the king or queen owned everything, including the people, or that the rights of individuals were determined by the will of the sovereign. Locke argued that such sovereign authority over the individual was contrary to the law of nature. The bundle of rights that Locke envisioned every person possessing also included the right to one's labor. This means that individuals have a right to the fruits of their physical labor, as well as their ingenuity, creativity, and innovation. Locke also explained how we can come to have property rights in land or other natural resources. Rights not based in political decree or favoritism. The key for Locke was what he called labor mixing, which occurs when a person uses their physical labor, ideas, imagination, and creativity to transform previously unused physical material. For example, Joe and Sarah arrive in the New World and find an unclaimed area of land. They begin a process of transforming the land to build a farm. According to Locke, this labor is how Joe and Sarah acquire rights over the land. Property rights over the products produced on the farm is an important addition because it means that Joe and Sarah have the right to decide how best to use their crop. They can consume it or trade it with people for other goods and services they might need. These insights about the importance of property rights in ensuring a free and prosperous society are as applicable now as they were when John Locke was writing them originally. Locke's groundbreaking writing and thinking about equality of rights and the equal dignity of all people led him to consider the role of the monarchy, and in a broader sense, the role of the state. As a thought experiment, Locke asked us to imagine what it would be like if there were no kings or governments of any kind. Locke understood that it would be difficult and, to use his words, inconvenient to enforce our rights, or to protect ourselves, or to resolve disputes. Locke explained that people would realize that it's more convenient, effective, and fair to establish third-party, independent mechanisms to resolve conflicts. Let's suppose that Bob decides to trade his beer for a box of Adam's apples. However, after the exchange, Bob discovers almost all of the apples are rotten. Adam denies any wrongdoing and refuses to give Bob his beer back. A heated conflict like this could lead to violence, and sure enough, Adam assaults Bob and threatens further violence if he presses the issue further. These were Locke's inconveniences. But what if a neutral arbiter existed to help resolve the dispute? Bob decides to sue Adam and the two go to court. Bob and Adam tell their versions of events to a judge, who listens carefully and, after weighing the facts and the existing law, passes judgment on who has been wronged and what compensation they are owed. The conflict is resolved without physical violence based on a set of rules or laws. Locke argued the state emerged from this realization that creating a third-party, neutral arbiter could manage these inconveniences better than individuals on their own. Critically, though, Locke also explained that the justification for what he called just government was that it protected people's rights and ameliorated these inconveniences. In essence, the reasons for the existence of the state are the same reasons for limiting its size and power. According to Locke, a just government is one that seeks to protect people's rights. For more information on John Locke, visit essentialjohnlocke.org. And to learn about more essential scholars, visit essentialscholars.org.